Hello and welcome back to A Squirrel Plays. Today we'll be sharing some helpful tips to make sure you get the most out of your Session 0 when starting a new TTRPG adventure. This is not a steps 1 through 10 kind of list, it's just some random pieces of advice that me and some of the other nuts over in the Discord would like to share with you. Things we've either found helpful in the past or wish we had done before. And if you're new to the whole TTRPG thing and don't know what a Session 0 is, well, it may depend on who you ask. Some say it's the session before the campaign starts where everybody gets together, makes their characters, determines their hard stops, and that kind of thing. Others say it's all the time you spend before you even get together and just reaching out to individuals either one by one or group chats and trying to get a feel for what you all might be interested in. Me personally, I'm a firm believer of a Session 0 and a 0.5, with 0 being the time you spend gathering interest and talking to friends and seeing what they may or may not be interested in, as well as when they're available. A Session 0.5 would be when you know who is playing, what you're playing, and when. This would be when you lay down the official rules and determine your hard stops and how things are going to be run, giving everybody a clear picture of what's in store before making that final commitment. Either way, it's a step I think often gets overlooked because so many people are eager to start playing, and if it helps put it into perspective, look at it this way. Let's say you're painting a room in your house. Session 0 is the primer you put on the wall before you start painting. If you don't put the primer on your wall before painting, a couple of things are likely to happen. 1, you risk ruining the color. Without the primer, the color you're painting over has the potential to bleed into the new color you're putting on and change it slightly. If that happens, you'll end up with a room that's not quite the color you originally wanted. Also, you'll have to put more coats on because that color underneath is likely to suck up the new paint you're putting on, whereas a good primer would block out the original color completely and give you a nice new surface to work with. And second, you risk your new color actually falling off the wall. Primer not only keeps the original color down and provides a new surface for your new color to shine, but it gives your new color something to properly adhere to. Lots of people skip that priming step because 1, it seems like more work, and 2, they're anxious to get that new color on the wall, just like a TTRPG player is excited to start a new adventure. But without the proper prep work, geez, say that 3 times real fast. But without the proper prep work, nope. But without the proper prep work, you may find yourself giving yourself more work than intended, struggling, not having fun, and ultimately not getting the experience you originally hoped and gave your time for. And just as some primers are better than others, some Session 0s are better than others. Pro tip, if you really are painting a room in your house, don't use Kills primer. It's hot garbage and high quality paints won't even stick to it. For more helpful home improvement tips, don't forget to like and subscribe. That said, a good and well thought out Session 0 has a higher chance of ensuring that your next TTRPG campaign will be fun and enjoyable. But notice I did not say guarantee. Later in the video, I will tell you why. Now, let's get on to some random tips here and see what we can learn. My first piece of advice for you is something I highly recommend you do before even talking to anybody about anything, and that is to define what the heck you want to do. What are you looking for, not what are you willing to work with? Do you want a game like Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition where you have rules for anything and everything under the sun? Or do you want something a bit more free-flowing like EZD6, ICRPG, or Mouse Ritter? Do you want fantasy, science fiction, or cyberpunk? What setting do you want? Do you want to be a superhero or do you want to struggle to survive? Those are the kinds of questions you need to ask yourself before you even start poking around and asking other people. And I say that not to encourage you to be selfish, but because TTRPGs consume a lot of your time, and if you're spending all that time on anything less than what you want, you're going to get aggravated more and more as time goes on. Also, if you know what you're into, it'll make finding players with similar interests a bit easier. Instead of approaching friends and saying, I want to play a new campaign, you can say something like, I'd like to start a new campaign in a cyberpunk setting where every session is a struggle to survive. Right away, everybody has a decent idea of the flavor and can tell you without any further prodding whether or not they're interested. As Theo so wonderfully put it, be sure people actually want to play the same game you want to run, or if you're the player, make sure you find a GM that is running a game you want to play. No RPG is better than an RPG you won't enjoy, and I couldn't agree more. On to tip number 2, and honestly, this is basically the same as number 1, it's just the other way around. Once you've determined exactly what you're looking for and start scouting out some players, make sure they know exactly what they want. Don't let them be afraid to give you a clear definition and say what they want, because again, if you're not playing what you want, it's going to get aggravating as time goes on. Have them answer all the same questions you asked yourself on a subject. If you see them bending a little bit one way or the other, or you feel the need to bend a little, don't do it. Well, I say don't do it, but we all know it's going to be impossible not to bend a little bit, but try to keep it to a minimum. And I say that because this is what will happen guaranteed. If you start bending for a player now before the game has even started, you'll spend the rest of the campaign bending for them. And believe me, the older you get, the harder bending gets. It's okay not to have the same interests. I know for a lot of us, our natural instinct is to somewhat give in and try to make the other person happy, but in the long run, you're doing yourself and them a disservice. So when you see those differences come up, acknowledge them and politely tell the other person that you're looking for something different and that it's probably better that you don't play this game together. And if you just really want to play a game with them so they don't feel left out, there's always the option for one-shots. Which brings me on to my next tip, which is experimenting with one-shots. Honestly, I'm surprised that nobody mentioned this in the Discord when we were talking about session zeros. I highly encourage you to try different one-shots with the people that you're considering playing an entire campaign with. Obviously, you want to try a one-shot that is going to be very similar to the campaign that you'll be running. This will give you a really clear idea of who you're playing with and how they play their game. It will show you how they handle their own table etiquette as well as how they handle themselves in character. Now, I will say this, some people handle their one-shot characters entirely different than their campaign characters, and because of that, you may need to clarify that this is a test run, or that you would at least like for them to take it a bit more seriously as though they would a campaign. Also, if you're the GM that will be running the campaign, this will give you a really good idea of just how crafty your players are and just how difficult they might make things for you when planning your sessions. In a sense, it will help you measure the game's difficulty. Had I done this before starting my very first campaign, I would have realized something about a couple of my players ahead of time before it was too late. In my first campaign, we had 2 players that said they were very roleplay heavy and were only interested in a good story. They didn't care about difficulty or leveling, getting fat loot, none of that nonsense. They just wanted to go on an adventure and have a nice story. However, when we got to playing, it was very clear that that was not their play style, despite what they said and how they saw themselves. They might have actually saw themselves as story-driven players, but the way they played was entirely different from what they said. They were both very much min-maxers and wanted to get the absolute most they could out of every level. One of them even left after just a couple sessions because the campaign wasn't moving fast enough and his character wasn't progressing as quick as he'd like. The other one also left with them, but ended up coming back just a few sessions later because he thought some D&D was better than no D&D. And if you've seen my other videos, you already know how that story goes. Long story short, no D&D would have been the better option. And this is why I mentioned earlier that a good session zero still does not guarantee a good time. I told them I was more interested in story, and they confirmed that they were also more interested in story. It seemed like a good match, but once we got going, we found out it wasn't so. As Captain Picard said,
"It is possible to commit no mistakes and still lose. That is not a weakness. That is life."
But I made plenty of mistakes, believe you me. Another thing you should most definitely talk about during your session zero is your house rules. And I don't mean house rules in the sense of the rules that you have made up for your current game you're playing. I mean rules for your literal house. Even if you're not playing in person and are instead playing on a virtual tabletop and using Discord to talk or whatever the case may be, this still applies. What I am referring to is how you prefer people to handle themselves. Do you care if they show up to the game drunk? Do you care if they show up to the game stoned out of their gourd? How do you feel about distractions such as surfing the internet and looking for memes while they're playing or texting on their phone? These kind of things definitely need to be discussed before the campaign starts. Some people are fine with other players surfing memes and texting on their phones, so long as they can hop back into the game and pay attention when they're called upon. Other people prefer that you turn your phone off completely and don't do anything but focus and pay attention to the game at hand. If you don't find the type of people that match your play preference, you're just going to get more frustrated the more time you spend playing with them. If you're the type of person that likes to be focused on the game and not constantly having side conversations and roping people back into the matter at hand, then you need to find other people like that to play with. On the other hand, if you dig memes and don't mind side conversations constantly derailing the game, then you need to find other people like that too, because you might get a little bored with the constant seriousness of the game. And this also applies to smaller things, such as the types of language used at the table. Do you not want people to swear all the time? Would you rather they keep crude jokes to a minimum or leave them at the door altogether? If you start to see that things aren't matching up well, then now is the time to back out. The sooner the better. I have high praise for the guy that left my first campaign and never returned. He got about 2 sessions in and realized it wasn't the game for him and politely left instead of dragging it out and trying to make it work. I didn't quite understand it at the time, but the farther we got along in the campaign, the happier I was he had the experience to know what to do and the wisdom to do it, because I started to realize how unhappy both of us would have been with each other. Which brings me to tip number 5, handling your differences with grace. I feel like this should be common sense, but in the world we live in today, I feel like it's been lost somewhat, or at least a little convoluted. Sometimes it feels like we've tried so hard to be progressive and accepting of others' needs that it has opened the door for lots of people to just push their needs onto others, whether they're accepted or not. I'm not sure which video it was, but a while back I mentioned there was an article about a vegan player that joined a campaign already in session and demanded that the GM remove all the animal killing. On top of that, one of the players was role-playing as a chef, so this player requested that the chef no longer use animal parts in his cooking. Now, if you're a vegan, that's cool, more power to you. I live down in the dirty South, surrounded by barbecue pig and fried chicken, so animal-friendly alternatives are a bit hard to come by, as tasty as they may be. However, I would consider this player extremely rude because that campaign was already in session. The GM had already spent time preparing who knows how much of the campaign, and now this vegan player is requesting that he change it all because the fantasy world they're playing in doesn't line up with his moral views in real life. Also, what about the player that was the chef? How excited was he or she to play that character, and now they have to change it? Supposedly, according to this article, the players all agreed on the changes, but you remember what I said about bending? Unfortunately, we don't get to see a follow-up article on what happened, so we're left to guess. But either way, I would consider the vegan extremely rude to come into a campaign already underway and request changes, especially changes of that magnitude. What he should have done is inquire about what the campaign contained, ask specifically about the animal stuff, and when he heard the conflicts, he should have just said, "No thanks, that campaign isn't for me." I also just realized I'm recording with the door wide open. Then if the GM wanted, he could have extended an offer to change things instead of being put in a position where he would have had to say no and possibly hurt someone's feelings or redo a ton of his work. So if you're working your way through session 0 and find some big things you can't work with, be clear about it. I can't play with X because Y reasons, but I'm down for a different game in the future if you want to try again. In the vegan's example, that would look something like this. I can't join this campaign if there's going to be animal violence because that's really important to me, both in real life and fictional. If you have a game in the future where you can work around that, I would love to join and play with you guys then, but I don't want to slow down this adventure. Super simple stuff. And for tip number 6, we'll assume you found who you want to play with, you've decided on what game system, and you are all getting fairly close to starting. But it's not time to start yet because you need to clarify the rules of the actual game. Now, it wouldn't be a Squirrel video if I didn't dunk on D&D 5e at least once, so here I go. 5e 100% needs this part of Session 0 because due to the bloat of rules the game has, they get a bit convoluted and confusing and sometimes don't make a lick of sense. The spell Thunderwave, for example, or last I checked anyway, the community can't seem to decide on how it actually works, leading to a couple different variations. These are the kind of things you need to clarify before your game begins so there's no surprises when you get underway. With 5e, I'll go ahead and tell you that would be borderline impossible to go through all of these because there's just so much you'd have to go through that there's no way you'd catch everything. Something will slip through the cracks, but the more you can eliminate, the better. But 5e isn't the only game that needs this. If your game has any type of flexibility to it where 2 different GMs can run it differently, then it needs to be covered. Some common things you might cover are how will you level up? When will you level up? How about that fat loot, resting, or healing? This might also include things that the GM is choosing to remove from the game, such as certain spells and abilities. And on that specific note, let me tell you what I did for our current campaign I'm running, which just so happens to be Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Instead of spending hours upon hours upon hours looking through every single spell and ability that the game offered, I had my players shoulder some of the work for me. After all, why should the GM do 100% of the work? I told them that our level cap would be 10, and what I wanted them to do was write out a plan for their character from levels 1 to 10. By that, I mean I wanted them to list out every spell and ability that they plan to take. These choices weren't set in stone because I know minds change over time and you might find that you wanted something else to add to your kit instead of what you originally picked. However, this allowed me to pick things ahead of time that I didn't want in the game that I hadn't thought of. For example, I knew I didn't want Tiny Hut because it would absolutely ruin some things that I had planned out for this campaign and story. By having the players plan this out ahead of time and picking what they could and couldn't keep, it removed any surprises later on. If you had really hoped and planned on getting Tiny Hut and then I told you that you couldn't get it once you finally hit that appropriate level, well, how disappointed and upset would you be? Now the players knew ahead of time that they couldn't have Tiny Hut and were able to make plans accordingly. If they had to make an entirely new character and class, now was the time to do it. I've brought this concept up before to some other people, and a lot of folks think it's a crazy thing to make your players do. However, I've seen nothing but positive things from it. As mentioned before, it removes several surprises from your character development, but also it helps the newer players figure out what the heck they're doing. By sitting down and figuring out what they want to do from beginning to end, they have a better idea of where they're going. This way, they don't get 3 levels in and realize that they're not too keen on the class they chose. Except for Steph, because that took us several levels to figure out how that custom class actually worked. On top of that, when it comes time to level up, you have everything you need at your disposal. All you have to do is look at the notes you made on your plan and just apply it to your character sheet. Now, as I mentioned before, these choices weren't set in stone. If the player decided last minute they wanted to try another spell, they could. But they knew that I might reject that decision. As the hamster put it, Session 0 is an agreement between the players and the GM. If both parties can agree to the rules, then both parties shouldn't be playing the game together. And speaking of the hamster, he did share a document with me for his Session 0s. It's a step-by-step process he goes through, and honestly, it's pretty good. I asked him if I could share it with you all, and he agreed, so you can find a link to that step-by-step process in the description below. Also, if you're wondering why in the world I'm running a campaign in 5th edition, that's because I started it long before I tried anything else. I'm pretty sure I've mentioned it before, but this will most likely be my last game in 5e. That said, we're only about halfway through the story, so we still got a good bit to go. And for the last tip, if you've been in the TTRPG space for any amount of time, you've probably already heard of this one, or at least parts of it. One thing you absolutely need to discuss in Session 0 is your hard stops. And by hard stops, I mean things you are absolutely not okay with, things you do not want at all to see in the game. That might include things such as gratuitous violence, sexual acts, necromancy, demons, or whatever the case may be. If there is something that you can't handle or do not wish to see, Session 0 is definitely the time to say so. It is also important that you clarify just how important these things are to you. You'll need to clarify whether or not it's something you just rather not see, or something that you straight up cannot handle. For example, you might be okay with characters hitting on NPCs and trying to get in their pants, but in reality, you just kind of rather not deal with that. On the flip side, you might have arachnophobia and absolutely cannot handle seeing any artwork for spiders. Certain topics and events might be too much for you because they bring back bad memories that you're trying to forget. Or in the vegan's case, there might be situations that just really go against your morals that you don't want in your fantasy world. That said, it is 100% up to you to say something ahead of time. Don't wait until the game starts and gets underway and you're a few sessions in, then tell everybody that you have a problem. It's your responsibility to clarify your known issues and concerns up front. If you know you're bad at paying attention and keeping focused, but you want to do better, then say something. If you don't say anything and end up in a group that likes sharp focus, well, they're going to get upset and you're probably going to get down on yourself. If you join that sharp focus group and say that you struggle to pay attention but would like to be able to, they might be willing to help and work with you. As a nice southern woman once told me, a closed mouth don't get fed. Just be sure to remember tip number 5 and handle these conflicts with grace. And just like tip number 6, sometimes things can slip through the cracks and we don't think about them until it's too late. To make those situations a bit easier for everyone, there are some safety tools you can use. Now, I won't go over all these as the video is long enough, but I will list a few of the common ones I've seen repeatedly. The ones I've seen the most are the X card, lines and veils, and roses and thorns. While writing the script, I did see something called stars and wishes, which is apparently a modified version of roses and thorns. Essentially, these tools are just to help improve communication and make things easier for everyone. But tool or no tool, you should regularly check in with your players and your GM to see how things are going. Make sure things are still fun. See if there are things you need to do more or less of, and just try to get a feel on how things are going. You've heard it several times before, but the key to a good marriage is good communication. Funnily enough, a TTRPG is no different. The better all of you are at communicating with one another, the better your gaming experience will be. And as a squirrel that's been in a relationship or two, let me tell you, communication is difficult. I know some of these tools sound like they were made for a bunch of snowflakes, but the point is to improve the communication. And if you feel like this was made for snowflakes, I can almost guarantee you that your communication needs a little work. Because I thought and felt the same thing when I first saw them before, and then I had a look in the mirror. Communication is one slippery thing. And that's it, ladies and gents. Like I said before, this is not a step-by-step process, but instead just some tips to keep in your back pocket when you attend your own session 0. But no squirrel video would be complete without a shout out, so today's shout out goes to my current campaign group. We're currently on our 2nd campaign together and have also experienced several one-shots together, and I'm pretty lucky to have all of them as players. Parker is usually our comic relief and is also running his own YouTube channel over here doing some Minecraft things that I don't understand at all. Steph manages to put cat ears on every character he ever makes and has also recently got into the whole YouTube thing, but is taking more of a live stream approach. You might have seen me join his streams on Fridays where we shoot up a bunch of space bugs. Hang on, Steph, I got this.
That's suicide!
But anyway, Craig, while having the absolute worst luck in the world when it comes to rolling dice, is always ready and willing to do anything and everything to make a decent story, no matter the cost to his character. And Glee, who is the reason I got into TTRPGs to begin with. And if you're thinking it's something sweet like I started playing TTRPGs to try and win her over, no. She actually put me between a rock and a hard place and I had to step in for a GM that flaked on everybody, but that's another story for another time. So much appreciation to all these lads and krakens for making the experience enjoyable and putting up with my constant experimentation mid-session. Even though we're playing 5e, Lord knows it isn't the book's way of playing 5e. And with that, we're out of here, ladies and gents. If you have any good Session 0 suggestions, be sure that you drop them down in the comments below. Share some things you wish you would have known before starting a campaign, or things you have since made sure to check with before starting any game ever. Are there other safety systems you've used in the past and you prefer? Have you found them to be helpful? And as always, remember to stay safe, have fun, because that's the most important part of the game.